Once upon a time, in the wild Bay Area, there was a designer. This designer was wandering around, moving squares in 8-pixel increments. Nice story, yeah? Guess what? That's me. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Carola, and for those who don't know me, I'm a product designer at Dropbox in San Francisco, California. Which is why the whole story, Pixels, Bay Area. All right, let's get into what we're gonna talk about today. You probably guessed it from the title, but it's going to be storytelling. Have you ever struggled with explaining your designs to stakeholders? Have you ever resorted to that plain old boring problem statement solution framework that everyone uses? It's out there. We've seen it 100 times, literally, and it's just never exciting. I'm going to show you my 3 favorite techniques on how to present your designs in an engaging way. During your career as a designer, you'll encounter a number of times where you're going to be trying to convince someone that what you are doing is the right way forward, that what you've designed was the right thing, and that they should hire you and not the other candidate. And so you're seeing where I'm getting at, but this is going to be helpful in so many ways, whether you're an agency designer pitching to clients, whether you're looking for your next job and trying to craft a perfect case study, or maybe you're a designer at a company that is trying to sell their strategy or their vision inside the company. In all of these situations, the tips and tricks that I'm sharing today will make the difference. So we're going to be talking about the narrative arc, the hero's journey, and the undeniable story. Let's start with one that you may have been using without even realizing it, and it's called a narrative arc. If you've never heard the word narrative arc, just a brief overview. It's a technique that people use to write great stories for movies and books, and in general, every story usually follows an arc that tends to max out at the climax and then go down. So it's called an arc because that's the shape of an arc, and we'll go into the details of why that is. But basically you lay this layer on top of your basic story framework, which is supposed to be comprised of a beginning, short context, a middle part where all the action happens, and then an ending where you sort of wrap up the story. Now take this that you have and imagine that the x-axis is time. So beginning, middle, and end. And imagine that the y-axis is actually the amount of action that is there at each step. So you want to start from the very bottom, and the beginning of the story will have very little action. You start adding a piece after the other until you reach your climax, your apex, the top and the maximum moment of your story. This is where the hero dies and everything seems to be falling apart. And then after that, you sort of modulate the intensity to help the user come down to a more peaceful moment. There are stories that end at the climax, and those are cliffhangers. So you could do that if that's the goal of your story. If the goal of your story is to make people come with you to the end and understand how the story ends, whether that's a happy ending or not, you need to modulate that intensity in a way that makes the user calm down to a quiet state in the end phase of the story. Now, you may be asking,
but Carola, why and how is this relevant to me as a product designer? I don't make movies.
And then I would tell you, well, let's take a look at how you can apply this to your design, because you are crafting stories. Every time you present your design to someone, you are telling a story. So let's look at how it's done with a practical example. I'm going to take the example of a design review. So imagine you are at work, you have this great design that you've done, and you're towards the end of your design process where you're trying to hand it off to engineers, and engineers are ready to start building. What do? You call up a design review and get together all of your cross-functional partners. Great. Everyone is in the room. And you want to start at the beginning of your arc. Remember, not everyone knows what you're going to be talking about. They may have come from a different meeting. They may have seen this once. They may have seen this 10 times, like possibly your PM. So for example, you start from the very start of the story and you want to remind everyone why you're doing this. How does this fit into the broader company strategy? How is this problem influential to where the company is going? What are the reasons we decided to focus right now on this problem? And generally, you can get help from the PM on this phase. Maybe the two of you have been crafting this story and defining this strategy for a long time. And so you can definitely partner up while telling this first part of the story. Once you've given a little bit of context, you want to start to narrate what went through your mind and how you approached the design to get to where you are today. So you want to start from the very first things you've done and just narrate how you explored various solutions, various wireframes, and you went broad and designed many different options so that you show that you've expressed the breadth of solutions that one could look for. So after that, you bring them along with you in understanding why you chose one. So you can share how you share this with users and what you learned. And this is in the middle and you're adding action on top of it. And it's almost like a story. You chose something, but then there's like a change of pace. Then the users didn't like it and liked something else. And so you went back and changed it and changed it and changed it until you come up with the design. And that's where you show what you have today. And it's going to make an immense difference if you've taken them along the journey with you up to that climax of what you found as being the solution. And once you're there, ask them what type of feedback you're looking for. What is the stage that you're at right now? What are the things that you can still change? That way, your audience will understand exactly in the recap and at the end what it is that you're looking for. That's the resolution. From there, a great conversation can start where it's very focused to what you're looking for and they know that you've tried so many things before. It's going to make a huge difference. Imagine sharing this just by opening Figma and just sharing your screens versus telling them the stories of how you've gotten to those screens. Let's now take a look at a technique that focuses a little less on the level of intensity and modulation, but more on the steps that you can take in your story to keep the story engaging and interesting. And I'm talking about the hero's journey. The hero's journey is something that you don't see as often and that I really want to take you through because it can make a world of difference in how you explain your story. Maybe less in a design review context, but more in a case study or portfolio review where you're trying to describe the whole story of that project all the way to the end. Imagine your favorite hero movie and keep that in the back of your mind as we talk through this technique. So I'm going to just go through what is the classical technique and how we can apply it to design as a second step. So the classic hero's journey is generally split into two. And half of the journey happens in the ordinary world, the world of known, the world where everything is predictable and you usually remember your movie, and there's always a start where they show us what is their ordinary life. That is the start of the story. And the end of the story most of the times. Spoiler alert. But I'll have a visual here to help me visualize this, but it's split into a ordinary world at the top and then the world of the unknown, of the magic and surprising unknown, also called special world. So you're gonna have these two parts. And sometimes it's not even that metaphorical. Sometimes it's really an ordinary world and a magical world. Sometimes instead, in more realistic movies, it's part of a metaphor. Let's see all the steps. So we said that you start in your ordinary world. We have this hero and she's just at home doing her thing. And then the hero feels a call to adventure. Somehow, somewhere, there's something calling her. And this call to adventure first, initially, gets rejected. So sometimes there's a phase of rejection of this call. And why am I the one to be called to this mission? I don't want to mess up the ordinary. I want to stay in this predictable, easy world. And after that rejection, usually comes a step where they meet their mentor. By talking to their mentor, they realize that this is bigger than them. In many of these stories, the hero then, after talking to the mentor, crosses the threshold of the ordinary by getting, and sometimes literally descending, into the unknown. And at this stage, we are in a world that the hero does not know. And so they're going to be facing a number of obstacles, of threats, and enemies, and meet allies along the way. And this is the part of the journey where they get tested. Can they really make it? Until we get to our core part of the journey, which is where the big monster, the big fight happens. And that's usually where you get that fight, sometimes a death and a rebirth. Sometimes it's not a literal death and it's just like, I'm just close to dying. But you get the sense. And a good story doesn't end there. A good story shows us the hero and how the hero comes back up from this death, from this terrible fight and tragedy that they've gone through. And usually comes up as a winner. And what they get as a winner, in most of the times, is a reward. This reward is something that they bring back to the ordinary world by going back on the road home and coming back to the ordinary. And it's not the same person. It's a new you. It's a new hero with a renewed energy and a renewed skill. And that's just like you as a designer. We'll see the parallel. But this is what the classical hero's journey looks like. Now, again, I am sure you're going to be asking,
Carola, how does this make any sense for me as a designer? I am not writing Disney movies. I am making professionally looking screens for websites and apps.
You may be, but you're still going to need to sell them and tell them, and you're going to need to get people engaged. So let's look at the hero's journey again, but from a designer point of view. And I want you to imagine that you are the hero of this story. So this is great when you're trying to interview, for example, and share what you've done. Imagine you're in the ordinary world, and that's your ordinary product in your current state. You, as a designer, receive this call to action, call to adventure from maybe leadership, maybe your PM, maybe a pain point from our user. So you receive this call and it feels like you are the one that needs to be solving this problem. And initially, there may be, again, a refusal of the call. You may be thinking, I don't really think this is the right problem to solve. I don't know how we can approach this at this moment right now. And you may be disagreeing with it a little bit. And this is where I go and talk to my mentor. And in this case, my mentor is the data. So you want to go and talk to your data, listen to what it's trying to tell you. And usually with that, whether it's in the form of quantitative data, numbers and stats, or qualitative data, like user journeys, user research. You want to listen to that mentor voice and decide whether you're committing or not. If you're not committing, you'll go back to the ordinary world and go back again. But if you're committing, that's where you're crossing the threshold and you're entering the world of the unknown. This world of the unknown is as unknown to a hero as it is unknown to us designers. We may have some numbers on what the problem is, but the solution is totally unknown at this stage. And so this is where we start to encounter our first enemies and allies, and we get tested. Basically, you're wireframing, you're testing with users, you're realizing what are your constraints, what are the technical limitations, what are the things that I can leverage, and what are the things that I need to be aware of. And this is where you get to the center of the action, the big fight. You put on your headphones, put on some good music, and then get into focus mode. And once you're in that focus, you start creating and breaking apart, and you start creating again and breaking it again, and see how you need to change it and change it again and get defeated and then come out winning again. And this is where the most of the action happens to me. As a designer, I feel like this is where you see death and rebirth all over again in your designs. And with this, you come out with your successful design and you ship it. You send it out to the users and see how this makes them feel. And that, to me, is the end of the fight and the place where you figure out your reward, where you find your treasure. And so with this user reaction, whether that's revenue, whether that's engagement, you take this and go back on the road to the ordinary. Back to your same old world that is just not the same old anymore. It's a new ordinary. You've changed it. Your product is not what it was before this feature launched. And so this is where you go in a full circle and come back. Sounds cool, right? This is, to me, the most fun way of describing a design project. With this, let's go into our third one. Let's take a look at a technique that I've learned a few years ago when I was working at the company before Dropbox. I went to a day-long workshop where a company was teaching the undeniable story. The undeniable story is a little different from the two techniques that we've just looked at. The first two help you modulate the intensity of what you're telling or the steps, but eventually you're talking about something that happened. With the undeniable story, what I've really learned is that I can use it to sell my vision or my strategy to someone. You've probably been told that a good story starts with a problem, the data, and then a solution. And I'm not saying that's not true. What I'm saying is that what this causes in your audience's brains is that it triggers a reaction that is not positive. And so you have your audience in neutral. And what you're doing by sharing with them the problem, you're taking them down into a sad state. And by starting this way, it's going to be really hard to take them from this low to a high point. You're going to need a way stronger piece of story to get you that high. But what the undeniable story is trying to say is that you don't need to start from the problem. What if in the seeing phase, you showed them what the opportunity is? You share with them this future, this grandiose vision of what you want your product or your company to be like. So this is going to require some work from a designer or from someone just to illustrate this future, because we are visual humans. We see things, and seeing things is a very important aspect of how we make decisions. So you want to show them your vision as the first step. And so instead of going straight up to the data to back this up, what you want to do is take that vision and get into the feeling phase, which is make them understand what are the obstacles between you and that vision, and make them feel how they can help you remove these obstacles. From there, once they've understood this, you may still have some skeptics in the room that may still say, look, Carola, I see you, I see that, but I still don't know if it's the right opportunity to follow. And so this is where you get into the believing state, where at this point, yes, you take all that quantitative and qualitative data to shape the opportunity. So mind me, not the problem, but the opportunity. How much money can they make from your idea? So long story short, this is what the undeniable story is trying to help you with. Convince everyone in the room, even the skeptics, that what you're saying is a good idea. Now, you can use this for many purposes, inside the company and outside. Entrepreneurs could take this to pitch their company. You could take this to shape the design vision of your company. Let's recap what we've seen today. We've talked about how to modulate intensity with a narrative arc. We've talked about which steps make a good story with the hero's journey. And eventually we've talked about how to convince a room that your vision is the right vision. With these 3 techniques, I've been able to prepare countless presentations, tell a number of stories, share a number of designs, and I'm really curious to see what you are going to be able to do with this. Please let me know in the comments, what are you going to use these storytelling techniques for? Are you going to use them to pitch your company? Let me know. I want to know. So, like all good stories, even this story comes to an end. If you've liked it, make sure you subscribe. And with this, I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.